What's up, you guys? Steven Vanderhook back again. Excited to jump into today's video, but first, gotta let you know, PSA, recently tried the Chick-fil-A Peach Shake. That thing is worth the hype. Oh, I don't know why I've waited so long. So for those of you who've heard about it but haven't gotten it, do yourself a favor. Turn this video off, give it a thumbs up, go get yourself a shake. Today's video is based off a conversation I had with a viewer recently that was really interesting. We were talking about their budget in different situations and whether or not, what the best step was to move forward, how to get ahead in life. And the idea really came up is, okay, so the answer is just make more money, right? And I said, well, no, not necessarily. The answer to getting ahead of life is not just make more money. There's two main levers we can pull, obviously, which is our spending and our income, right? The inflow and the outflow of money. Which is better, to make more money or to cut back spending, right? Grind harder, hustle harder, go get that side hustle, or cut back, eat your rice and beans, slice your budget in half, and then just peel back on the spending. Which one should we do? Obviously, the answer is it depends, and we're going to dive in a little bit to different examples today. Whenever you're dealing with a question like this, usually it's not just a simple yes, no, right? Usually there's a whole variety of different answers when the answer is it depends. And we have a lot of different scenarios, but some of the principles we're going to talk about are easiest to see on the extreme ends of the spectrum, right, of different scenarios. So on one end, you have people who, hey, it's a family of 5, and between the 2 adults and the 3 kids, there's 30 hours a week being worked on in Uber or whatever the case is, some part-time job that's spending 30 hours a week. Obviously, everyone knows you're not going to support a family of 5 on a part-time job 30 hours a week. It's just not enough income, right? There's not enough money to go around. You're not going to pay rent. You're not going to be able to put food on the table. That's just like the bare basics. So that's pretty obvious, right? And then on the other end of the spectrum is when you have like your classic dink couple, right? Dual income, no kids, and they both went to law school, and they're both billing at whatever $100 an hour, and they're bringing home $400K between the two of them, $400K, but they have no mental health. Their physical body is taking a toll because they're never exercising, they're never sleeping, they're always just eating takeout in the office. They're not taking care of themselves, right? We know they don't need to make more money. They probably need to cut back on their spending if they're not getting ahead in life, right? So there's the obvious two extremes, right? On one end, you're just not working. You're just not making any money. Clearly, if you want to get ahead financially, you're going to have to make more money and pull that lever and make more. On the other end, if you're not getting ahead financially and you're both just grinding away, obviously we got to cut back on the spending, right? We got to cut back on how many different Armani suits you're wearing to the office, how many cars you have to drive to the office to work all day, what kind of house you're coming home to spend a few hours of miserable sleep before you wake up and do it all again, right? I mean, if you're doing that, clearly we all know you need to cut back on the spending. So what about in the middle? That's where it gets a little more interesting. For more in this middle, we have an interesting scenario of a family of 3, right? It was 2 people. They both went to college. They graduated, and they were working for a little bit. They decided to start having a family. The wife quits working and wants to be a full-time mom, comes home and does the home mom thing, and there's just one income now. And, went to college, making fine money, nothing special, 50K, 60K, whatever it is, right? So there's enough money to go around. 3 people can live off of 60K. Obviously, you're living in New York, San Francisco. You got to multiply all these by what? 40, 50%, double it, whatever. We know the numbers are very varied based on where you're living, but you get the idea. I mean, we're going to just go off of averages here and what's most common. So, 50, 60K, that's enough money for 3 people if you have your spending in the right place. But how many times do we see people who are in that situation and they're just not getting ahead? Right? They want to save for a down payment on a house, and they're never going to. They're never getting there. Or they want to pay off their debt, and every 6 months they use that credit card again, or they finance a new toy, or they get a new appliance, they decide to get a washing machine, they finance it, whatever it is. Right? And you see the pattern, and now they have this kid is 2-3 years old, and they're about to have their second kid, and they're in the same situation they were years before. Well, in that case, we might have to tweak both levers, or maybe just one. It really depends on the specifics. So if they are continuously just kind of buying nice things, or they're going on fancy vacations still, and they're financing their life, right? If you're using consumer debt, the answer we already know, you're at least tweaking the one lever. You got to decrease the spending. We know that. If you're financing and you're using your credit card to go buy experiences, to go on vacations, then right off the bat, the conversation, we already know, lever number 1, it's getting tweaked. You got to cut down your spending. You're spending more than you can. You got to change that behavior. You got to recognize that spending on credit is just a miserable way to live. But the question is, well, okay, if I'm making, 60K and I'm spending an extra 5K a year on debt, what if I make 70K? Can I do that? Sure, right? You could do that. You still need to change the behavior, right? You still need to get first and recognize, hey, I gotta just not be in the habit of spending more than I make, and not thinking that financing, taking out a HELOC in order to go on a vacation, or financing a four-wheeler is a good idea, right? Like, you gotta change that initial behavior. But in that case, yeah, if you're making 60 and spending 65, you could make 70 and then have your extra 5K, right? But you're still living on pretty thin margins. You got to change both levers, but yeah, you could work more money. But the real interesting question when it comes to increasing the money, right, and increasing income is, what cost is that coming at? And in some cases, it's not even a cost. It's a good thing, right? Maybe, this full-time mom wants to do part-time work, and it's something that she really enjoys. It's a passion project. Well, awesome. I mean, to pursue a passion project while still being a mom and still fulfilling your family dreams while being able to make some money, that's great. That's awesome. And I don't think there's any marginal cost there. I think that's benefit on both sides. Not only are you helping out financially now, not just doing the home stuff, bringing in some money, but you're doing it for something you love, something you enjoy, and you find fulfillment in. Sweet. That seems like all upside. And maybe you're, for the husband, he's working 40 hours and he decides, well, I could actually I could take on a new project or a side hustle or some contract work and add another 5-6 hours a week, nothing major, and be able to make a little bit more money. Great. Probably nothing wrong with working 45 hours a week instead of 40. You're still probably going to have the same lifestyle that you have, more or less. You're going to have to rearrange your time, probably watch a little less TV, a little less time on your phone or whatever, but you can still make that work just fine. We're not talking about anything extreme. It's when we get to the more extreme lifestyle where we're saying, hey, you're working 60 hours a week, working more than that isn't really going to provide much value. Now, obviously, we're not talking about a situation where it's like, hey, we're in dire need and there's some medical bills that need to be paid and I'm in the grind phase, and for the next year, I need to just grind it out and work 60, 70 hours a week. I got to get that overtime, got to do what I got to do, rough times hit. That's awesome. And sometimes you got to go into those seasons. Life's all about times and seasons. But we're talking about more long term, right? If you're working 60 hours a week, working that extra 5-6 hours a week is now coming at a pretty steep cost. And if this is something you're habitually doing for years on end, this isn't like a one-time emergency season. This is your lifestyle, and at what cost? Right? When you start working 60 plus hours a week, for most people, everyone's a little different. There are some exceptions, obviously, but for most people, you're gonna probably having some pretty severe trade-offs. Your relationships at home are probably suffering. Your physical body's probably not in the best shape. And I'm not saying you need to be in fighting shape and, trying to make varsity or trying to be, get that starting role, that scholarship spot, whatever it is. I'm not talking about that. But are you even exercising at all? Right? Are you eating any type of nutritious foods? Are you moving your body? Or are you just so exhausted from work that you go home, you just want to veg out, kick the can, and just freaking go to sleep and just not think about life, right? At that point, that extra 6 hours a week is coming at a pretty steep cost. Right? There's a big difference. There's major diminishing marginal returns. Yeah, you're getting more money, but you're not happier at all. Right? We all know that there's only so much money you can make that really contributes to happiness. After that, once you have your necessities and a couple luxuries, more money doesn't really add more happiness, right? But if you're not to that point yet, you might still think that. And if sometimes you start at the one end of saying, hey, we really are struggling, we're miserable, we got creditors, we got credit card bills. And so you focus, you turn your life around, and you cruise past, and you think, wow, we're so much happier now. We're in a good spot. We're in a good place financially, and we're way happier. And then you just zoom past that and keep going down to the other extreme, and the pendulum totally swings. And then you're thinking, hey, got to make more money. Got to make that 150 this year. Got to make 180 next year. Always got to make more than the year before. Now you might be too far the other side of you got to pedal back and realize, what kind of lifestyle do you want? Do you want to just work all day, every day? What for, right? What's the point of buying that big house if you're never in it? What's the point of paying for that pool in your backyard if you never get to relax and float around? Another interesting example I thought of in the middle, right? Not in the two extremes of, oh my gosh, we don't make any money, and wow, all we do is work, and we make so much money, but we spend it all. All right, more in the middle. Think about like a graduate couple, right? A couple who's in graduate school. And maybe one is working and the other one's in school, so their bills are high because they're paying for grad school, right? So you have big bills. That's the reality. Whether you took out some student loans, you're trying to just pay for it yourself, whatever. Either way, you got those bills, and that's rough. Now the question is, what else are you doing with your time and your money? And you see some people who it's like they want to live in the future. They say, hey, I'm going to grad school. I'm going to make a ton of money. I'm going to be a dentist or whatever I'm going to do. I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm getting my PhD. I'm going to be a professor. I'm going to make a lot of money down the road. I'm going to start living like that now and take out all my student loans, just max out those student loans, kind of live on it now, and then, kind of party now. Even though I haven't earned it yet, I know I will become a dentist or whatever it is. Then you start to see them, they're going on kind of lavish vacations. They're going and visiting their families often, traveling, and that's where you start to think, I think you need to reduce that lever. I think you're spending a little too much money, especially if there's only one person working. Now, obviously, grad school can be full-time, but a lot of grad school, it really depends on the program. Some, you could easily add that extra 10 hours a week. Again, there's so many things, whether you're working on campus and you're working as like a research assistant making good money, or even if you're doing something simple, doing your Uber Eats or whatever it is, and just making something simple on the side, or, on the weekends you do it together and you spend a few hours doing some Uber or whatever. Either way, you can still tweak both levers most likely. Now, maybe you don't need to make more money because you are focused and it's a PhD and it's a rigorous program and you don't want to do that. That's fine. But when you see people who are living as if they already are a dentist, but they're doing it on their student loans, that's when you think, I think you're getting too far ahead of yourself. You're still borrowing on that future. You're still in that mindset. And the idea behind this, that's really common, is they say, well, I'm going to make $150K a year. And we're living off of $90K a year. We make 50, my wife makes 50, we finance 40, and we're living like 90. But that still leaves plenty of cushion. That's not the problem. The problem is that you want to jump to the future. Because then, once you graduate and you're making that 150, well then you start thinking, hey, my next step, in 5 years, I'm going to be a partner, I'm going to buy into this practice, I'm going to make 200, I'm going to make 250. So if I'm going to make 250 in 5 years from now, I can spend the full 150 now. I can spend the full 180 now and start going into that red again. That's the problem, right? It's the behavior behind it. It's not the actual numbers. Yeah, living off like 90, living off of 90K when next year you're going to be making 150. Yeah, you're way below what you could be living. But that's not the problem. Is that you're projecting. You're going off of future hopeful income streams, which nothing's guaranteed. Obviously, things could go wrong. Maybe you don't graduate, but let's say you do. If you still have that same mindset of saying, well, I have some investments that are going to return, and I'm going to make some more money. You're still focusing on the future and spending off of a hypothetical future income and future number, rather than your actual present reality. And that's the common problem that we see. That's a reason a lot of the time why people do get ahead of themselves and they do need to pull back that first lever and start spending less. The reason they got into that mindset is because they were focused on the future and they were focused too far ahead and focused on all upside, not hedging risk, not taking into account that maybe you don't get that promotion, or maybe you don't get that raise, and maybe you don't transfer companies, maybe your investments go belly up, maybe, you know what I mean? Like that type of behavior, focusing on the future and then living off of it and banking on it as if it's guaranteed, that's that behavior that we really want to pull back on. That's behavior that's really, really dangerous, and it can really need to make a turnaround. It can be really difficult to do so, but it's really, really important to recognize my present reality is it. If I make more money in the future, great, I'll spend more in the future, but I'm not going to spend more now based on what might happen in the future. That's where you get yourself in trouble. Appreciate you tuning in. Like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.